So, I grew up around here. I grew up in Highland Park. Had a great childhood, nothing to complain about, really. I was spoiled, honestly. And, but for whatever reason, I just always felt weird in my own skin. And I couldn't figure out why. I was always acting out in class clown. But I was always getting in trouble. And I had an older brother, an older sister, and a younger brother. And for whatever reason, I was the one that was always getting in trouble. I was always the one that was getting yelled at. And I couldn't really figure out why. And then come high school, I tried alcohol for the first time. And I'll never forget it. It was the first time that I felt comfortable in my own skin. It was the first time I could take a breath. And it's crazy because I got a girlfriend that night. I never had one of those before. And so I was like, I have arrived. I'm going to do this all the time. And unfortunately, I did. And not long after I started getting into trouble, my parents caught me, took away my car. Nothing worked. And somehow I graduated high school and went to college. And I met my future wife. And that kind of slowed things down a little bit. I chased her, we fell in love. But then, after about a year or two, I picked up drinking again. And then it got to the point where I was blacking out every single time I drank, like 5-6 nights a week. And I remember Jamie, my wife, telling me, like, you gotta figure it out. Like, this is really bad. And I remember I was at this house, and a house I'm not usually at. And this guy was like, hey, I'm gonna go get some PKs. Do you want any? And I was like, what are those? And he goes, painkillers. I was like, sure, I'll try them, knowing nothing about it. And when I took those, my brain went to a place, my body went to a place that I'd never been before. I had finally arrived. And I told myself that I'm gonna do this every day the rest of my life. And I did. And I kept it from everyone. Everyone. No one knew. Not my friends, family, no one. And I would use by myself, taking, 10, 15 pills a time every evening. And I got away with it for a while. Somehow I graduated college by the skin of my teeth. I don't know how. And I moved out to West Texas to work in the oil fields. I just got engaged. And I remember telling myself, well, I'm going to get clean, once I get married. I'm going to get clean, once I have a kid. I'm going to get clean this and that. And unfortunately, that never happened. Somehow, some way, I got clean. Well, I got off opiates for my wedding. But the entire honeymoon, I was drunk the whole time. I even got drunk in my wedding. Way too drunk. And my wife kind of knew, but she didn't really understand the seriousness of the situation. And as soon as we got back from our honeymoon, it was off to the races again. And I remember running out of opiates one time, and I started driving around looking for sketchy people. And I found this guy, and he goes, well, I can't get you painkillers, but I can get you heroin. I was like, nope, hung up. I was like, no, it's not happening. He called me later, and I hung up the phone. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And then I sat there for about an hour and thought about it, and I was like, well, do I have to use a syringe, Do I have to do any of that? He's like, no, I can show you how to snort it. I was like, okay, I guess. So I go over there, I meet him. I'll never forget this. He makes me go inside his apartment, and he sits right next to me on the couch, looks me straight in the eyes, sticks a syringe in his arm, plunges it, and then gets up and was like, hey, all right, what do you need? How can I help you? And I was like, what am I doing here? But I wanted to change the way I felt so bad, I was willing to do whatever it took. And he showed me how to make it into a powder and snort it, and I did that. I did that for probably 6 years, every single day, without fail. Until my wife and I had to go to a wedding in Dallas, and I ran out. And I had no idea what withdrawals were. No clue. And I got so sick I couldn't get out of bed. I was pooping on myself, throwing up on the floor. I mean, I was so done. And I finally had to tell my wife what was going on. I had to tell my family what was going on. And they sent me to a 30-day rehab, a nice one. And I went, and I didn't put any effort into it. I expected to give them a check, and they made me clean, and that did not happen. So my wife came to pick me up, And 2 days later, we were in San Antonio celebrating my newfound sobriety, and I went on a run, found a homeless man, and he got me heroin. And that cycle just continued and continued and continued. I would get clean for a month, then I'd go back to treatment for 30 days. I'd get clean for 3 months, then I'd go back to treatment for 60 days, 90 days. And still to this day, I'm scared to count how many detoxes and rehabs I went to, but it's around 18 to 20. And that was within a span of about probably 5 to 6 years. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Like, why can't I just stop? But I always use this analogy. If some guy put a gun up to my head and said, if you do these drugs right here, I'm gonna shoot you in the face. My first thought would be, how do I get those without getting shot in the face? And that's when I knew I had a serious problem. And then, Jamie and I's relationship was terrible. We loved each other. She loved me, I loved her, but I couldn't get it together. And then this beautiful girl comes in the world, little Hallie.
Hallie!
And she was the greatest surprise I ever had. And I thought that would be it. I thought I would stop. And unfortunately, I did not. And I remember I found this new job in Dallas, and I went a week early to get everything ready and set up and move into our new home while my wife and Hallie and her mom packed everything up. Well, I just spent that entire week using, unfortunately, and when she got there, it was a mess. I mean, I could barely tie my own shoes. It got bad. And to fast forward, I finally went to the needle, and that's when the wheels really fell off. I was in my car at a La Fiesta grocery store, and I couldn't hit a vein. I tried. There's blood all over me, and I could not find a vein. So I decided to go inside the grocery store and use it there. And the next thing I remember, I'm on a stretcher getting rolled through the grocery store, and I look up, and there's 2 paramedics on either side of me, and I said, "What's going on? What happened?" And they said, "You flatlined. You were dead for 30 seconds." And you would think that would be enough, but it wasn't. Then, fast forward, my wife files. She files for divorce. She's trying to get my attention. She's terrified. And instead of using that as, "Oh, I'm going to get it together," I use that as an excuse to go even harder. And the next 3 years were horrific. Absolutely horrific. She had to distance herself from me, and then finally we did end up getting divorced, and I used that as an excuse to go do whatever I wanted. And I remember sitting outside and having this thought, like, you need to go to the Men of Nehemiah. And the reason I knew about it is because I came with my mom during high school. Before she even knew I had a problem, she was a supporter of this program. And I remember seeing those guys up there, and I was like, I will never be that bad. I wasn't that bad. And I fought it and fought it and fought it. And finally I said, well, what the heck? Why not? I'll try it. And I went through the Nehemiah program. It was the single hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But the hardest part was when I graduated, and I was taking my ex-wife and I started dating again, and I was taking them to Disney on Ice, and for whatever reason, when I was still in sober living, I decided to relapse. And I did. And she took one look at me, and I'll never forget that look. I spent an entire year working on my recovery, an entire year writing her every single week about my experience here, and I failed. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm done. I give up. And I remember Rand and Ty came in my room, and they're like, you gotta go to first phase. You gotta go back to the start. And I did. And I went through again. And that beat me up. I was so dead inside, I just said, they asked me to jump, and I said, how high? And finally, I graduated. My ex-wife and I, for whatever reason, started dating again. And then a few years ago, we got married. She got pregnant on her honeymoon. And then 2 months after she had Lila, our second daughter, she got pregnant with Isabel, who's back there. And life's been good. And I want to talk to you guys about what's going on in my life. And I can only speak from my experience. And I know how you guys feel. I know how you feel. I know how you feel. I know how you feel. I know because I sat in those seats. I remember when you came in and you had such desperation on your face. You were dead inside. And that's the stuff that I need to see. That's the stuff that all you guys need to see. Because we forget. We forget where we were. But I know how you guys feel. And there's 4 things that I want to talk to you about. And the first one is discipline. Everyone says that discipline is important, but they never want to tell you why, and I'm going to tell you. It is the strongest form of self-love. It's ignoring something you want right now for something better later on. Discipline reveals the commitment you have to your dreams, especially on days where you don't want to. The future you is depending on the current you to keep the promises you made to yourself yesterday. The future you is depending on the current you to keep the promises you made to yourself yesterday. Let me tell you something. You are nothing without discipline. Nothing. You cannot accomplish the other 3 things I'm going to talk about unless you have discipline. I don't want to be on my deathbed in 40, 50, 60 years and think, man, I could have done more. I should have just worked a little harder. I should have danced in the kitchen more with my daughter or told my wife I loved her a little more. I refused to do that. I've come too far. And where I learned discipline was in this program at the Men of Nehemiah. I remember my house leader, Anthony Murphy. I don't know if he's here. I was so mad at him when I first got here. I remember one example, I had cleaned my plate and done everything I needed to do and make sure the counter was spotless. And I remember him saying to me, "What's that?" I go, "What's what?" And he goes, "That right there." I go, "What?" He goes, "That right there." I go, "That piece of dust?" He goes, "Clean it up." I was like, okay. But what I failed to realize is that he was disciplined. He was taking pride in something that was bigger than him. And then I started to realize that. I started to take pride in this place. I started to take care of my own things. And I still implement discipline, especially on my hygiene. And ask my wife, I fold my towels. I fold my shirts. I didn't have someone picking up after me when I was a little kid, but I pick up after myself now. Another thing with discipline is you gotta just get rid of motivation. Throw it away. Because if we lived off of motivation, we'd get nothing done. I can't tell you how many times I'm working out in the gym and some kid will come up to me and be like, I'm gonna get jacked. I'm gonna work out like you. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're not gonna do it. Just stop talking about it and be about it. You know? And we're so good at that. We're so good at telling, especially addicts. We're so good at telling other people how good we're gonna do. I'm gonna kill this thing. I'm gonna be great at this thing. And then we quit. Because that's what we're really good at. The devil doesn't want addicts to get clean. Because he knows the impact that we can have. My advice to you is find something that you're passionate about. Mine happens to be fitness. Find a hobby that you enjoy that gets your blood flowing. Because we have to replace that high with something else. We have to. Because we spent 30, 40, 50 years doing the same thing. And Nehemiah is 9 months. Everyone's always like, I've been in this classroom 6 months and I'm tired of it. There's a reason it's 9 months. There's a reason you're in this class for 6 months, because we have to rewire our brains. We have to completely change our thought patterns. And that is extremely, extremely difficult. The second thing I want to talk about is gratitude. I'm so grateful for this place. One thing Colonel always says, and I'll never forget it, is a grateful addict will never use again. And he's so right. I remember all the other treatment centers I left. I would try and go fix all the problems that I created. Every single thing I put in front of my recovery was the first thing that would go. Every single time. There isn't a day that goes by where I'm not grateful for the things that God has given me. Another thing Colonel talks about is get rid of your opinion. Throw it out. Especially when the new man comes in here. Because if you guys are moaning and complaining about not having coffee or ketchup, what's he going to do? How can you have an opinion when you're in a rehab in South Dallas? How can you have an opinion when you have literally thrown your family and your friends to the wayside? Let it go. Do what you're supposed to do. Never, ever forget your gratitude. I can tell you I've been to the nicest rehabs in the world, and I've been to this one. And what I'm trying to say is, no matter where you go, no matter where you are, people will always find a reason to complain. Always. Misery loves company. You guys understand what I'm saying? Especially, like I said, the new man. Don't bring him down with you. Don't let him forget his desperation. Another thing I'm grateful for is that beautiful woman right there. Jamie, raise your hand. Hey. Not only is she absolutely beautiful, but let me tell you something. She is the toughest woman I have ever met in my life. And I'm going to tell you why. That woman has been through more garbage. Well, I guess y'all can imagine, but some of y'all can't even imagine. She's had to, one time I OD'd in the shower when we were at this ranch in the middle of nowhere. She had to drag me out of the shower, call poison control because there was nowhere we could go. She stayed on the phone with him for an hour and put her ear on my chest to make sure that I was breathing. She did that for 9 straight hours, and every time I'd stop breathing, she'd slap me across the face. She did things like that all the time. I put her in situations that you can't even imagine. I remember one time I left all these syringes in her car, and she was so terrified because she didn't want Hallie or some kid or somebody else to touch them, so she's literally driving around South Dallas trying to figure out where to throw them away. She had to file for divorce, something she did not want to do. That was the last thing she wanted to do. All she was trying to do was get my attention. She wanted me to be the person that she knew I had the potential to be, but I refused to do that. But she never gave up. She never, ever gave up, and I'm truly grateful for that. The third thing I want to talk to you guys about is prayer. Now, this is something that I did not understand at first. I thought prayer was dumb. I literally did not understand it. Someone come up to me like, we're praying for you, thoughts and prayers. I'm like, what does that mean? You know, I never understood prayer. And my mentor, Kit, Melinda, and Colonel always talk about the power of prayer. And I never understood that until I came here and I started peeling the Bible apart. And I made a commitment to myself and to my family that I would pray with my wife every single night before bed. And let me tell you, the first 6 months to a year was weird. I did not like it very much. It was uncomfortable. I'd never done anything like that before. But I made that commitment. And slowly over time, I realized that not only is prayer a connection to God, but it keeps you honest. It keeps your relationship honest. If I'm doing something that I'm not supposed to be doing, I'm not going to be praying, an honest prayer at the end of the night. I'm going to be like, oh no, I need to fix that so that when I do pray tonight, I'm on it. I know what's going on. And I saw this statistic about 3 months ago before I even knew this. There's a statistic that says only one couple in 1,250 couples get divorced if they pray out loud together every single day. Not 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,250. And I always thought that was so fascinating because it works. Number 4 is my faith. Number 4 is my faith. God was an afterthought to me. People would ask me, like, aren't you scared to die if you stick that in your arm? No, half the time I wanted to. I didn't care. I was so miserable. I wanted to go. But about 2 months into the program, something hit me. And I said, you know what? Why not go for it? Why not try and figure out who this guy is? What do I have to lose? I've lost everything else. Why not? And so I started just diving into the Bible. Like nothing I'd ever done before. I studied it like it was a final exam. I put everything I had into that book. And what I found out was God's real. 100%. I have no doubt about it. I know in Colonel's class, by the way, y'all need to start taking notes in Colonel's class. Y'all need to start moving your pens around. Because I read his notes every morning when I wake up. That is the best knowledge you can get. Start taking notes, write that stuff down. Put a date at the top and write Colonel Lewis and then write notes. I read that stuff every single day. And it is paramount in my recovery. But anyways, I took countless notes when I was here. I did everything I could possibly think of to get clean. And guess what? I still relapsed. But I came back, and I did not give up, and I worked even harder. I did not quit. And that's my advice to you guys. Don't quit. We're so good at that. Get disciplined and work hard at something. Find something you can stand on and be proud of. Be a sponge. Soak everything up. You're not going to remember 0.5% of the things you learn in this class. But I guarantee you will if you start writing it down. Soak it up and then read it. As far as my faith in this, being the spiritual leader of my family, that was hard. Especially because basically my wife in our first marriage, she had to do it. I was nowhere to be found. The only time I ever would play is to manipulate her into getting something that I wanted. That was it. And so for me to go from not spiritual at all to being the spiritual leader of my family, it took time. It was really hard. And it was scary. But a little after a little, a prayer after another prayer, to the point where I started picking where we went to church. You know, I started picking the Bible studies we attended. But it took time. In times past, I would get out of rehab and be like, respect me, I'm clean now. I know what I'm doing. She had nothing to go off of. We have to give our loved ones time, because we're not going to do it perfect every single time. Let me tell you something. Life is still hard. You know, like I said, this Nehemiah, it's the stretch before the marathon. It's easy to stay clean in here. Are you kidding me? You get food, a bed. I mean, it's hard, but it's easy. If that makes sense. But when you get out of here and life hits you in the face, that's when the stuff it gets really hard. And that's why I love Nehemiah, because it gave me a tool belt. And basically what I'm saying is, it gave me all the tools I needed to be able to deal with the things I used to not be able to deal with. Something bad happened to me, I get high. Something good happened to me, I get drunk. Nothing would happen to me, still get high. It didn't matter. You know? And now, I don't have substances to go to when I'm feeling anxious. I don't have substances to go to when I'm angry. But I have this place. Amen. And I have my tool belt. And I have my discipline. I have my gratitude. I have my prayer. And I have my faith. And with those 4 things, I and all of you can conquer the world. There's no limits to what we as addicts can do. The devil did not want me to speak tonight. I joke with my wife all the time. I hate this cord. I joke with my wife all the time. But it's serious. Every single time something good is about to happen to our relationship, the devil attacks us every single time. Denzel Washington used to say, if the devil's not after you, you're doing something wrong. Because God wants to take us out. We've been selfish our entire lives. And it takes 9 months to a year to rewire your brains. It's not easy, but I know you can do it. I want y'all to refuse to be a statistic. Refuse to be that 2% that gets clean. You stand next to another man, you don't make a pact. Go find somebody who wants it more than you do. Hang out with winners. Guys, don't ever quit. I know I said that earlier, but we're so good at it. I cannot tell you how many times I stood in that doorway at, what's it called now? Chris Smith Hall, and said, today's the day I'm going to run home. And for whatever reason, God kept me here. And I'm so, so unbelievably grateful. Tell your story. Don't be afraid of it. As Colonel always says, lead with your testimony. Don't be scared of it. I give my testimony at the Dallas Country Club all the time. I don't care. I'll give it to anyone, anywhere. It doesn't matter. I'm not afraid of I'm not ashamed of my past. God didn't put me through all the things he put me through in order for me to hide at home. He put me here to change the lives of men. I did not want to come and speak tonight. I've never preached a message in my life. I've told my story, but I've never done this before. And that devil told me, you're going to suck. Maybe I did. I honestly have no idea. But don't ever give up. Always lead with your testimony. I was so tired. I refused to see another man raise my kid. I refused to see another man marry the woman that I love. Put in the work. Put in the work. It's worth it. It's hard. Life's still hard. But put in the work, and I promise it'll change your life. That's all I got.